The topic I chose for this research assignment was this article written by John Garcia, Taylor Johnson, and Mark Dixon, and it was titled Behavioral Treatment for Pathological Gambling in Persons with Acquired Brain Injury. So, why is the subject of this article important? So, when addiction treatments are discussed, people usually tend to think of things such as alcohol and drug addiction. So, although they do represent major societal problems, they sometimes tend to leave out other classes of addictions that do not involve external chemicals, but are equally devastating to personal and social lives. There is no official diagnostic classification for many of these behavioral addictions and include behaviors such as internet gaming, compulsive and out of control sexual behaviors, and gambling. But there is a growing body of science that's beginning to uncover some common roots of these behavioral addictions. These behaviors, or most behavior addictions, are all learned behaviors. Thus, it's safe to assume that they can also be unlearned. And applied behavioral analysis offers the right set of tools and techniques to address these behavioral addictions. Now, what question did this article specifically address? Pathological gambling is an addiction and a mental illness categorized under impulse control disorder. It is theorized that those diagnosed with impulse control disorder are at a higher risk of developing pathological gambling behaviors. The research in this study also is interested in the fact that most pathological gamblers are comorbid with other psychological disorders, and this comorbidity makes it more difficult to assess and clinically treat these behaviors, which thus requires research in support of the possible applications of ABA. The researchers in this article are trying to prove that a specific CBT treatment package can be effective for the treatment of reckless behaviors linked to gambling in persons with acquired brain injury. What was the dependent variables being measured in this study? So there was two dependent variables, one being the monetary expenditures during gambling opportunities. So this is simply the amount of lottery tickets or poker chips, depending on our participant, that are purchased or waged during the contrived gambling opportunities. The gambling opportunities were scheduled once a week after CBT sessions or instead of treatment during the baseline phase. The session would come to an end if the participant chose not to use any of their monetary value or they spent all of it. The second dependent variable was the GSAS, which is the Gambling Symptom Assessment Scale, which is a 12-item self-reporting scale that is administered every week prior to intervention. That measures the intensity, frequency of the urge, thoughts, and/or behaviors related to gambling. The treatment, which is the independent variable in this study, consisted of an 8-week cognitive behavioral therapy treatment package. The treatment session lasted 1 hour and were conducted on a weekly basis. Topics at each training session varied from week to week and were presented to participants individually. During the treatment, participants were given various tasks per each topic each week and were instructed on how to self-report their results. Generalization probes is also something that was embedded into treatment and is an assessment that allows one to determine if the learner is able to perform the newly acquired skills outside of the instructional context. So generalization probes were deployed during baseline and specifically intervention by allowing participants to engage in the gambling in real casinos or lottery machines. The experimental design that was used was a concurrent multiple baseline design, which allowed for all 3 participants to receive treatment packages simultaneously. This was very advantageous to the integrity of the study because it moderated the different histories of the patients, but still allowed for them to receive treatment in the same way. The results. So for the amount of money gambled per participants, it showed a similar change across all the participants after the implementation of treatment. The results indicated that all participants wagered less as they were exposed to the intervention package during clinical sessions. The amount of money that Shiloh wagered, Shiloh was the first participant and is the first graph. So the amount of money that Shiloh wagered showed a steady decrease from baseline throughout the intervention. During baseline, she wagered on average $20, but when intervention started, she averaged about $14.60 during each simulated opportunity. Jerry, the second participant, averaged $20 wages during baseline and consistently chose to take all 20 chips. After he went through individual treatment, he averaged $1.20 during simulated gaming opportunities. And then lastly, Jetter, he placed bets that averaged approximately $20 during baseline. He purchased all 20 poker chips on every opportunity that was offered to him. And after he started treatment, the amount of money that he chose to wager immediately decreased to $0 per session. The scores on the GSAS for all participants also decreased in both the clinical session and the generalization probes. So following the introduction of the treatment, Shiloh's average GSAS score during baseline was 38.3, and she had a lower GSAS score the first week of intervention. So even though the questionnaire was administered prior to her treatment session, her average score on the GSAS was 24.4 during intervention. Jerry's average GSAS score during baseline was 19.5. His average GSAS score during the intervention phase was 10.6. Following the initial week of intervention, his GSAS score progressively decreased, and after each successive session of the CPT package, he was near 5, which is his lowest rate. Lastly, Jetter displayed an average GSAS score of 16.7 during baseline, and his score declined on the GSAS during baseline, but his observed behavior remained constant. His GSAS scores decreased further with the initiation of treatment, and his average GSAS scores during the intervention phase was 3.8. So the follow-up data from the study suggests a moderate reduction in gambling behavior and self-reports from the baseline levels as well. The results of this study are very indicative for the future of this field. So the impulsivity of persons with ABI may come in a number of measurable behaviors. And one of those measurable behaviors that this article focused on was gambling. Given that people with ABI are more likely to gamble than non-acquired brain injury individuals, it appears that treatment attempts need to be evaluated for use with this specific comorbid group. This intervention was an application of CBT treatment, and it was successful when administered to the individual treatments with ABI. Furthermore, the treatment is empirically validated with actual gambling behaviors that we saw in the generalization probe sessions. As a behavioral analyst seeks to expand our scope of application beyond traditionally served clinical populations, this article proves to us that we should look favorably towards the potential of ABA to treat pathological gamblers.